Masks glowed, candles flickered, and a guest died. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Drop your city below. I enjoy every word. Wolfe unmasks the killer in the crowd. If there is a rule in the brownstone, it's that nothing comes through the front door before 11 unless it's orchids, a homicide, or somebody who doesn't know better. On that Tuesday, it was the third kind. I was at my desk, looking busy enough to satisfy Fritz, when the bell rang. I opened to an undersized fellow in a camel hair overcoat that had seen better years. He was clean-shaven, nervous, and trying to hide it behind a smile that wouldn't hold. In his left hand was a flat box tied with ribbon. In his right was a card. He offered both like a peace treaty. Mr. Goodwin, I'm Everett Vale. I was told to bring this to Mr. Wolfe. I have an appointment. That depends who told you, I said. Come in. He stepped inside and looked around the hall as if he expected it to bite. When I took his coat, he hesitated, then gave it up. The box he kept. I led him to the office, and Wolfe was in his red leather chair with a book on his lap, his attention on print instead of people. Mr. Wolfe, I said, Mr. Everett Vale says he has an appointment and a present. Wolfe didn't lift his head. He has neither, Archie. If he has a present, he may put it on the table and depart. Speak, sir. Vale set the box down and sat when I pointed. His voice had that careful, rehearsed sound men get when they're about to say something risky. I'm operations manager for Harrogate House. We're holding a benefit on Friday night. A Candlelit Masquerade. Oh, no electric light. Guests wear masks. We're raising money for the city shelter. Wolfe turned a page. An admirable enterprise. I do not attend benefits. I'm not asking you to attend. Vale leaned forward. I'm asking you to keep something safe for 3 days. I said, safe? We aren't a bank. What is it? A ledger. Vale tapped the box. The Harrogate ledger. It records donations and pledges, but also conditions. Some patrons don't want their names public. Some give only if certain people are excluded. If that ledger goes missing before the benefit, the whole thing collapses. There are already threats. Wolfe's eyes came up, gray and steady. Threats from whom? I don't know. Letters without signatures. Phone calls with no voice. We had a break-in last month. Nothing taken but a drawer pride. I can't keep it at Harrogate. Too many staff, too many eyes. Mrs. Felicity Harrogate advised me to bring it to you. If you refuse, I'll have to put it in a safe deposit box, and if anything happens, I'm finished. He said finished, like it meant more than a job. Wolfe heard it. His gaze shifted from the box to Vale's face. You will leave the ledger here, Wolfe said. Archie will give you a receipt. You will return tomorrow at 11. If you fail, I will place your ledger on the stoop. Vale exhaled. Thank you. The recommendation was from Mrs. Harrogate herself. Wolfe's mouth tightened. That woman has tried to invade my peace for 20 years. So be it. Archie, take the box upstairs. Fritz will put it away and find out why Mrs. Harrogate imagines my house a warehouse. I picked up the box. For paper, it was heavy, and the ribbon bit my fingers. Vale left. When the door clicked shut, Wolfe stared at the empty chair. A candlelit masquerade, he murmured. A barbarous conceit. Yet the ledger comes here. There is strategy in that, Archie, and suspicion. We will see which is dominant. I nodded, feeling the weight in my hands turn colder. In this house, trouble usually arrives with a corpse. This time it came in a ribboned box, and I didn't like the wrapping. I carried it upstairs, already wondering whose mask would slip first. I found Fritz in the kitchen slicing a trout into obedient pieces, a ritual that demanded silence. I gave him the box and told him it was a guest that needed a locked room and no curiosity. He lifted brows. Mr. Wolfe will tell me where, he said. He carried it off unopened, a comfort. A chef's curiosity can outpace a burglar's. Back downstairs, Wolfe had moved only enough to adjust his book. "What do you know of Harrogate House?" he asked. "Big old place on Riverside, now a cultural foundation. Mrs. Felicity Harrogate runs it. She collects causes and enemies. Enemies are self-collected." He steepled his fingers. "You will call her." I did. A secretary with a cool voice said Mrs. Harrogate was expecting it and would come at 2. At 1:45, the bell rang again. By the hour, our front room held a small parade. Mrs. Harrogate in furs, her nephew Julian, and a gaunt woman named Lila Marsh, the events director. I let them in and ushered them to the office. Wolfe waited, of course. Felicity Harrogate entered as if she owned the chair he was sitting in. Late 60s, sharp eyes. "Nero, you look intolerably comfortable." "Madam, I cultivate tolerability." Wolfe's tone was dry. "Explain why my house has acquired your ledger." She sat opposite him without invitation. Julian took the yellow chair by my desk. Lila Marsh stayed standing, hands clasped. "Because someone in my orbit is trying to spoil Friday," Felicity said. "Everett is diligent but not clever. I require your cleverness. The ledger is bait. It would not be safe in a bank box. The thief would wait. Here, if it is taken, I will know it is not random." Wolfe regarded her. "You assume the intent is theft, not sabotage by rumor or arson with your candles. The threats name the ledger. They want it. I want to know who. I also want the benefit to proceed. There are people who would delight in seeing Harrogate House humiliated, and people who would profit." Julian cleared his throat. "Aunt Felicity may be dramatizing. The letters could be pranks." She didn't look at him. "If you dislike being here, Julian, you may leave." He subsided. Wolfe turned to Lila Marsh. "You arranged this masquerade?" "Yes, Mr. Wolfe. Historic London, no electric light. Planned for months. Donors are flying in. If there's a disruption..." Her left foot tapped once, then stilled. "There will be, unless I prevent it." Wolfe shifted to Julian. "You are the nephew. What is your position?" "I'm on the board. Mostly ceremonial." "Ceremonial is another word for powerless." Wolfe looked back at Felicity. "Who besides these two is concerned with the ledger?" "4 people have access," she said. "Everett, Lila, Julian, and my advisor, Conrad Voss. He handles donor agreements. He insists on discretion, which is why the ledger exists." "Motives?" Felicity's laugh was short. "Everett has none beyond fear. Lila wants the event to succeed for her career. Julian wants my approval and my money. Voss wants control. If you ask which of them could be guilty, the answer is yes." Wolfe nodded. "Miss Marsh, you will produce the threats. Mr. Harrogate, bring me board minutes for 6 months. Madam, tell Mr. Voss to attend here at 11 tomorrow. Archie will visit Harrogate House this afternoon." "And if I refuse?" Felicity asked, smiling. "Then I return your ledger and close my door." Wolfe smiled thinly. "I suspect you will not refuse." She stood. "You were always insufferable when you were right." She swept out with Lila behind her. Julian rose last, gave me a look that said he wanted to say something but couldn't find which lie to use, and followed. When the door shut, Wolfe said, "Note the first fact. The ledger is not the object. It is the lever. We must find the fulcrum. Go." Harrogate House sits on Riverside like an old dowager that's learned to take checks. The iron fence is decorative, the stone steps serious, and the doorman looked hired for posture. I gave my name, got waved through, and found Everett Vale in a ground-floor office that smelled of polish and worry. He stood like a pupil called to the blackboard. Did Mr. Wolfe say anything? Only that the ledger is bait. Show me the threats. Vale produced 3 envelopes, anonymous, typewritten, stamps bought without affection. I read them while he watched my eyes. Each demanded the ledger back before Friday's masquerade, or there would be a public disgrace. One promised that candles can be persuaded to speak. Whoever wrote them had a taste for melodrama. Who wants the benefit wrecked? I asked. People we've refused, he said. Some donors want private conditions. They're in the ledger. If it vanished, we'd be accused of favoritism. Names. He swallowed. Dennis Crow, a developer. Mrs. Harrogate rejected his money because he wants the city shelter moved off land he owns. He threatened. There's the Meyer couple. Tech money. They demanded a board seat. She said no. Conrad Voss handled them, and Salvatore Pirro, a former trustee, pushed out after an audit. He's been ugly since. Where was the break-in last month? Donor records. Nothing taken but a cabinet forced. Upstairs, the corridor was lined with portraits of philanthropic ghosts. The cabinet showed a repaired scar. A narrow window opened on a fire escape. The latch was new, but easy to argue with. Conrad Voss's office was next door. Vale knocked. Voss invited us in without rising. Trim, 40-ish, dressed like a banker who had discovered culture. His desk was neat, except for a pale taper candle in a brass holder. I laid the threats down. Read these? He scanned them with a menu face. Unpleasant but vague. Theater, I think. Theater needs a reason. Who's angry enough to write? Many, he said mildly. My job is to say no discreetly. Start with Crowell, Pirro, the Myers. But you know this isn't about paper. Someone wants leverage. Then why keep the ledger here so long? Because discretion is our currency. Moving it creates panic, and panic leaks. Vale said. Conrad suggested giving it to Mr. Wolfe when the letters came. Voss smiled thinly. I suggested protecting it. Everett chose the method. He noticed my eyes on a small locked cash box on the credenza. Personal files. Maybe later. Mrs. Harrogate expects you at our place tomorrow at 11. Of course. No questions. We found Lila Marsh in the ballroom, supervising ladders and stacked candle crates. She was gaunt and efficient, voice calm as a metronome. You've read the letters, she said. Sure. Capitals, no signature. I planned the candlelight for historic London. We tested airflow, exits. No risk. Risk attends anyway. Who would like to see Friday crack? Crowell hates Felicity. Pirro hates everyone. But ruining a shelter benefit is monstrous. Monstrous people are common. Anyone nosing around records? No, only staff. Conrad's in and out. Julian too, though he's lost most of the time. Everett patrols. A stranger would need a key or skill. Her fingers had a faint yellow stain where wax likes to live. Who supplies the candles? An antique dealer, Peter Reiter. Reliable. Reliable dealers still sell to bad buyers. I thanked her. At the service entrance, a truck was unloading more crates stamped with Reiter's name. I copied the address off a tag. In the car, I called Wolfe. 3 threats, enemies. Crowell, Pirro, Myers. Voss is smooth and steering Everett. Lila's running the candle show. Wax on her hands fits the job. Supplier is Peter Reiter. I'm seeing him next. Proceed, Wolfe said. Return before dinner. Fritz has veal. Traffic was light, but I felt the case thickening like wax cooling in a mold, and I didn't like the shape. Peter Reiter's shop was on a side street in the Aarauer village, with a bell that jingled like an apology when I opened the door. Inside it smelled of dust, brass, and old velvet. Candlesticks crowded every surface. Chunky church ones, slender dining ones, and a pair upheld by carved nymphs who looked sick of holding anything. Reiter came from behind a screen, tall, pink-cheeked, in an apron that suited a baker better than an antique dealer. You're early, he said, then added, not a bride. What is it? Archie Goodwin. I'm asking about your candles for Harrogate House. His eyebrows rose. Ah, the masquerade. Madame Harrogate wanted atmosphere and history, and she pays for both. Any complaint? Not yet. But who else has been buying serious quantities of tapers this month? He snorted. Candles are fashionable again. People pretend electricity never happened. But that Harrogate order was special. 120 beeswax tapers, treated so they don't drip. Treated how? With a slow burn retardant. I don't do it. My supplier sends them ready. Anyone sniffing around your delivery schedule, asking you to hold back? He hesitated, then nodded. A young man last week, very polite, asked if Harrogate's order could be delayed. I said no. He went pale and left. Describe him. 30, dark hair, expensive coat, trying to look casual. Not a workman, perhaps a donor. He shrugged. Why? Is there danger? Maybe just theater. Give me your supplier's name. He wrote it on a card. I thanked him and left before he tried selling me a candlestick shaped like a saint. Back at the brownstone, Fritz's veal was waiting and Wolfe was waiting harder. He listened to my report with that stillness that means he's moving facts around like chessmen. A request to delay candles, he said. So the masquerade is a pivot point. An obstruction there could expose the ledger or its contents. The question is, who profits from exposure? Or who wants a private condition erased? I said. If the ledger is gone, donor deals go with it. Absence can reveal as well as conceal, Wolfe murmured. I do not like Mr. Voss's neat sayings. They are too neat. He reached for the phone. Call Saul Panzer. Ask him to investigate Dennis Crowell, Salvatore Piro, the Meyer couple, and Conrad Voss. Quietly. I want current pressures, not biographies. I called. Saul promised to start with Crowell because developers make noise even when they whisper. At 9, I was settling with coffee and the evening papers when the bell rang. Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins stood in the hall with his hat in his hand and the trouble on his face. Evening, Archie. Evening, Mr. Wolfe. Sergeant, Wolfe said. You have a reason. I do. Harrogate House got a visit. Somebody picked a lock on the donor office. They didn't get much, but they left a souvenir. He held out a plastic bag. Inside was a stubby candle, half burned with a smear of red wax down one side. They found it by that cabinet that was forced last month. Their events lady swears all her tapers are plain beeswax and accounted for. This one smells odd. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Bring it here. Fritz appeared as if summoned by scent alone, took the bag without a word, and vanished to the kitchen. Any sign what they wanted? I asked. Same cabinet, same drawer. Empty except for impressions where folders sat. Vale says the ledger wasn't there. Mrs. Harrogate wants it quiet. It will be as quiet as truth permits, Wolfe said. Thank you, Sergeant. You will hear from me tomorrow. Stebbins left. Wolfe sat staring at the closed door. A candle left behind, he said softly. A calling card. Red wax in a house that uses pale beeswax. Someone is telling us where to look, Archie, or trying to tell us where not to. Either way, the move is ours, not theirs. Fritz brought the candle to the office on a saucer, as if it were dessert that might explode. He had scraped a little of the red smear with a paring knife and sniffed it like a man judging basil. It is not beeswax, he said. It is paraffin, cheap, and the red is sealing wax, mixed in after. There is a scent of clove oil. I use none. Harrogate's tapers have no odor. Thank you, Fritz, Wolfe said. Put it away where it will not be eaten. When Fritz left, Wolfe leaned back, fingertips together. Clove oil, paraffin, red sealing wax. Somebody carried a candle into that building for a purpose beyond light. Why leave it behind? Either accident or message. I distrust accidents. Maybe they used it to drip red wax on something, I said. Seal an envelope, mark a file. Or to counterfeit a seal, Wolfe replied. A masquerade invites imitation, masks, candles, documents. He looked at me. We will examine the ledger. I blinked. Vale left it with you as bait. Indeed. To study bait, one must observe it. Bring it. I went to the closet where Fritz had stowed the box in a locked tin. I carried it down, set it on Wolfe's table, and untied the ribbon. The binding was thick and worn. Wolfe opened it with careful fingers and turned pages as if they were orchids. He read in silence. "At least 3 entries are recent additions to older pages," he said. "Different ink, different hand. Mr. Voss's, I think. Note this." He pointed to a line. "A donation from Meyer Technologies conditioned on exclusive consultation rights regarding shelter relocation. Another from Crowell Developments offering twice the amount if the shelter site moved within 2 years. A third, smaller, tied to a promise that Julian Harrogate would be named executive director after the benefit. Those are the sticks of dynamite," I said. "Dynamite is crude. This is nitroglycerin. If exposed, Harrogate House appears venal." Wolfe tapped the margin. "And yet Mrs. Harrogate signed these conditions. She is not a fool. Therefore, either she is desperate or she is being maneuvered." The bell rang. I answered to find a kid in a courier cap holding an envelope. "Special delivery for Mr. Goodwin. Need a signature." I signed, shut the door, and opened it on the hall table. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper. At the top, in block print, was a time and place. Friday, 9 p.m. Harrogate House, East Terrace. Below that, 1 sentence. "Bring the ledger. No police." I carried it into the office. Wolfe read it twice. "So, the bait is requested, or demanded. They want a handoff under candles, which suggests urgency," Wolfe said, "and they know the ledger is here." Only 4 people knew for sure. Everett, Felicity, Lila, Julian, plus us. Plus any ear that listened. Still, it narrows the circle. Wolfe picked up the phone. "Call Mrs. Harrogate. Tell her to come here at 10 tomorrow with Mr. Vale, Mr. Voss, Miss Marsh, and Mr. Harrogate. Also, Sergeant Stebbins." Felicity protested, but agreed. When I hung up, Wolfe nodded once. "Tonight you will go to Harrogate House and walk the East Terrace. See what can be seen in daylight. Take your camera. Speak to no one unless spoken to. You are an observer." I got my coat. "Anything else?" "Yes. Do not take the ledger." I paused. "Even if they grab me. Especially then." Wolfe's eyes were flat. "If they want the ledger, let them want it in my office with witnesses. We will not play their game. We will make them play ours." Outside, the air felt colder than it should for November, and I drove toward Riverside with the note burning in my pocket. The next move was set, and the board was getting crowded. I didn't know whose hand would move first now. I parked a block away and came in on foot, because terraces don't like tires. Harrogate House at night was mostly dark except for security lights at the service doors. The East Terrace faced the river, a long stone platform with balustrades and a view that would have been romantic if you weren't thinking about someone being lured there with a ledger. I walked it slow, hands in pockets, head down like a man killing time. There were wrought iron benches, a pair of planters dead for winter, and 2 French doors leading into the ballroom. One door had a new lock with bright brass. The other had an older one that had seen better screwdrivers. I took pictures quietly. Near the far end, a gutter downspout ran beside a trellis. Anyone climbing it would be hidden from the street by a stand of yews. A figure came out of the shadow by the trellis, and I very nearly made a fool of myself. It was Lila Marsh, coat buttoned high, a clipboard tucked under her arm as if the wind might demand it. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I thought you left hours ago." I did. I came back to see where I'm supposed to deliver my demise. I nodded at the river. Nice spot. It's not part of the event ordinarily. The terrace will be closed Friday. Only staff allowed. That note, Everett showed me. Someone wants privacy. Privacy has a bad reputation in this town. What are you doing out here? Checking the doors. After the break-in, Felicity asked for extra vigilance. She rattled the older lock, frowned. This one sticks. Maintenance promised to replace it. Who has keys? Me? Everett? Security? Conrad? Julian sometimes borrows one and forgets to return it. She said it without affection. There's also a master set in the office safe. Conrad Voss has a key? I made it sound casual. He insisted he's coordinating donor arrivals. I didn't like it, but Felicity trusts him. Her eyes shifted to my face. Do you? I don't trust anybody who sells discretion by the pound. But that's not a crime. I pointed to the trellis. That downspout is a ladder for any gymnast. We have cameras, but Candlelight Friday will play tricks. We're restricting access. She tugged her collar. If this goes wrong, it's my career. Careers are resilient. People aren't. I let that sit. Did you recognize the candle Stebbins found? She shook her head. Not ours. Beeswax doesn't take red like that. Whoever left it wanted us to notice. Mr. Voss said the same. Did he now? I kept my tone neutral. You said supplier treated your candles so they don't drip. What if someone swapped a few? We count them in cases. If any are missing, I'll know. Her mouth tightened. Unless someone tampers with the count. Who keeps inventory sheets? Everett, I review. She hesitated. And Conrad asked for copies yesterday for insurance. That word rang a little. All right, I'll tell Mr. Wolfe. Get that lock fixed. She nodded and went back inside. Her footsteps clipped like a metronome trying to outrun a song. I finished my sweep, circled to the service drive, and spotted a sedan parked at the curb with the engine off. A man sat behind the wheel, hat low. When I passed, he lifted his head just enough for the streetlight to hit his cheekbones. Julian Harrogate. He pretended not to see me, and I pretended not to be interested. Back in the car, I called Wolfe. East Terrace is a good lure. One old lock sticks, downspout makes a clean climb, and U's hide the climb. Lila says Voss has a key and has been asking for candle inventory copies. Also, Julian was sitting in his car out front like he'd lost a bet. Wolfe was silent a beat. Good. We are approaching the trespass stage. Return. I got back to the brownstone close to midnight. Wolfe was in the office with the light on low, counting thoughts instead of sheep. He listened to my terrace report and stored it with a grunt. At 10, he said, they come, and you will listen more than you speak as usual. Fresh as yesterday's bread, I told him. Saul called? Not yet. Go to bed. 9:30. The next morning, the house had the feel of a theater before a matinee. Fritz set coffee and glasses as if we were expecting royalty, which we were, since Felicity Harrogate never believed anyone else's title counts. They arrived in a bunch. Felicity first, chin high. Everett Vale close behind with his tie too tight. Conrad Voss smooth as varnish. Lila Marsh with a folder. Julian slouching, and Sergeant Stebbins in a brown suit. I showed them in and took my place by the desk. Wolfe didn't waste pleasantries. You have been threatened. Your building has been entered twice. A foreign candle was left as a token, and I have received this. He handed the note to Stebbins, who read it and scowled. Felicity said, it's aimed at Everett. They think he'll panic and bring the ledger. They are correct about his panic, Wolfe said, but not about his actions. Mr. Vale will do nothing without my instruction. His eyes went to Voss. You suggested we send the ledger here as bait. You also have keys to Harrogate House and requested candle inventories. Explain. Voss spread his hands. I requested inventories to ensure no loss. As advisor, I need full accounting. The keys were granted to coordinate arrivals. There is no mystery. There is always mystery, Wolfe replied. Miss Marsh, who besides those present holds a terrace door key. Security Chief Martin Heller, and a master set in the safe. Who knows the safe combination? Everett and I. Conrad for emergencies. Mrs. Harrogate. Julian murmured. Everyone and his barber, then. Felicity shot him a look. Be quiet. Wolfe went on. Sergeant, the candle you brought contained clove oil and paraffin. Have you traced its seller? Stebbins shook his head. Not yet. Then I will be long on logic. Mr. Vale, who discovered last night's entry? A night guard. He found the donor office door open. Did he see anyone? No. Camera on that corridor was off for 20 minutes. We thought it a glitch. Wolfe's gaze lifted. An admirable word, glitch. Mr. Voss, you can request camera playback. Yes, through security. Yet you are on site often enough to do so at 2 in the morning. That is insinuation. It is hypothesis. Wolfe leaned back. Motive. The ledger holds conditional donations that, if public, embarrass Harrogate House and certain donors. Crowell and Pirro profit if the shelter moves. The Myers gain influence. Julian gains position. Mr. Voss might gain leverage with all of them. Voss's smile thinned. You are painting me Machiavellian. Not yet, Wolfe said, but I have chosen a palette. Lila Marsh asked, what do you want from us? To remain available. No one leaves the city until I permit. Archie will visit your terrace again tonight. Unseen. Sergeant, I request a man stationed with him to observe who arrives. Stebbins hesitated, then nodded. All right. Felicity said, Nero, if you get Everett hurt. I will not. Wolfe's voice softened. We will not take the ledger to your terrace. We will take something else. Julian frowned. Something else? A counterfeit, Wolfe said. A decoy whose loss reveals the hand that takes it. He looked at me. Prepare it now. I will dictate what it must contain. The room went still. Voss stared at the ledger case as if he could see through wood. Everett's hands clenched. Lila's eyes widened. Felicity Harrogate, for the first time since she'd walked in, looked like a woman who had wagered more than she meant to. Wolfe dictated from his chair while I sat at my desk with a blank ledger pad. Fritz dug out of a cabinet. He chose entries like a surgeon chooses cuts. I copied the Meyer and Crowell offers close enough to pass a glance, then added a new condition in Voss's legal rhythm about a quiet consulting fee payable to a shell charity. Wolfe had me misspell the charity's name in a particular way and initial the margin where Conrad usually did. When I finished, he nodded once. They will correct it if they touch it. Saul Panzer called before I could finish my coffee. Wolfe put him on speaker. Crowell's been leaning on Harrogate for months, Saul said. 2 nights ago, he told a partner he'd have the ledger by the weekend. Also, he's paying an ex-cop named Martin Heller, private security. Security chief at Harrogate, I said. Right, and Voss registered a non-profit last year called Candlelit Outreach. No activity, looks like a mailbox. Julian Harrogate has gambling debts, enough to scare him. Wolfe thanked Saul and hung up. Tonight we go to the terrace. No real ledger. Only watchers. At 8, Stebbins met me 2 blocks from Harrogate House in an unmarked sedan. He brought Detective Kincaid. Short, quiet, built like a tack hammer. We entered through the service door with Lila Marsh's help. Her knuckles were white on her clipboard. I told Heller you were coming to inspect the doors again, she whispered. That may draw him, I said. Good, she replied, and left. Kincaid and I took positions behind the yews. Stebbins stayed inside by the French doors with a clear line of sight. The river was black and patient. The terrace stones held the day's chill, and the air smelled faintly of wet leaves and cloves. At 9 on the dot, a figure climbed the downspout. He moved like he'd practiced, boots finding holds without scraping. A match flared, and he lit a red candle, shielding it from the wind. The flame caught his face. Conrad Voss. He set the candle on the bench, glanced around, and drew a folded envelope from his coat. He checked his watch, paced once, then stopped, listening. Another shape emerged from a gap in the yews, strolling in with ownership. Broad shoulders, security gate, Martin Heller. They spoke low. I caught tone. Heller blunt. Voss Titus. Wire. Heller reached for the envelope. Voss jerked it back, and for a second the polite advisor fell away. That was Stebbins's cue. He pushed through the French door. Kincaid stepped out beside me and I followed. The red candle threw a wet shine on Voss's cheekbones. "Drop it," Stebbins said. Heller's hand drifted toward his belt, then froze when he saw 3 pistols. He raised both hands. Voss tried for a smile and missed. "Sergeant, you're mistaken," he said. "I came to intercept whoever threatened us." "With a red candle and an envelope?" Stebbins asked. Voss's eyes flicked to me. "Mr. Goodwin, tell Mr. Wolfe he is manufacturing drama." "I'll tell him you volunteered for the part," I said, and took the envelope. Inside was the decoy ledger page I'd written. The misspelled charity name had been corrected in a sharp, furious hand. Under it was a separate sheet, typed on the same machine as the threats. It said, "Bring the real ledger tomorrow, or Julian's debts go public tonight." Voss went pale in the candlelight, like a man seeing his own mask crack. The masquerade had just ended for one guest. Stebbins read it, then nodded to Kincaid. They took Voss's arms gently but without debate, and Heller too, protesting that he was only following instructions. As they led them inside, I blew out the red candle with my thumb and forefinger. Its smoke curled toward the river, and I was already hearing Wolfe's voice asking who had been paying whom. Stebbins drove me back to the brownstone while Kincaid took Voss and Heller downtown. Conrad sat stiff in the rear of the other car, face lit by passing street lamps, trying to look like a man who had planned everything and merely missed a step. Heller did the talking, swearing he was only following orders. Stebbins ignored him. Wolfe was waiting in the office, lamp low, book closed. I put the envelope and the corrected decoy page on his desk and gave him the terrace play by play. He listened without blinking, then read the typed sheet that had come with the decoy. "Mr. Voss is not the author," he said. "He is the courier. Because he corrected my misspelling. Because he corrected it quickly. A blackmailer does not repair evidence on the spot. A courier afraid of being caught does. The red candle and clove perfume were instructions, and the writer chose them to point us at Voss." Wolfe's eyes drifted to the real ledger. "The only person who profits from his disgrace, knows Julian's debts, and knows every conditional donor entry is Felicity Harrogate." I stared. She staged the threats. She staged a trap. Crowell was buying security through Heller. Pyro was prowling for revenge. The Myers were ready to withdraw. She feared a genuine theft, so she engineered a counterfeit one. If Crowell tried for the ledger, he would be caught. If the plan soured, blame would fall on Voss. She also needed Julian frightened into obedience before Friday. Stebbins shifted. "You have proof, or a theory?" "We will have proof," Wolfe said, and called Felicity. "Bring Mr. Vale and Miss Marsh here now." They arrived in under an hour. Felicity entered first, regal, Everett trailing, Lila Marsh tight-faced. Wolfe handed Felicity the typed threat. "You wrote it," he said. "You can't prove that." "I can. Your Remington has a damaged lowercase e. These letters use an uppercase E in its place. Mr. Vale's is an IBM Selectric. Mr. Voss's is a Royal. Only yours matches, and only you would scent a signal candle with clove oil." Her poise slipped, then steadied. "Yes, I did it. I was protecting the house and the shelter. Crowell would have ruined the benefit. Conrad was angling for a private fee through his charity. Julian was drowning. I forced them into line. You endangered Mr. Vale. Wolfe said. Everett was never in danger. Hella was told to frighten, not harm. Her chin lifted toward Stebbins. If you arrest me, donors flee, the shelter loses money, and Crowell builds on their land. Is that justice? Wolfe held her gaze. No. My justice is to stop your method, not to starve your cause. You will dismiss Hella tonight, void the fee arrangement, and keep this ledger locked with 2 keys, yours and Mr. Vale's. Refuse, and I give Sergeant Stebbins your machine and your confession. She looked at Stebbins, then back at Wolfe. Finally, she nodded. Very well. You are still intolerable. Madame, it is my profession. Be charitable without deceit. Deceit feeds on itself, and soon you will not know which mask is yours. Everett exhaled. Lila's eyes were cold but understanding. Felicity turned for the door. The benefit proceeds, she said, and I will remember this. I rely on your memory, Wolfe replied. After they left, silence settled. Wolfe picked up his beer and regarded the ledger. You're letting her walk, I said. I'm letting the shelter live, he answered. Sometimes restraint is the only punishment that helps anyone. Now, Archie, dinner. Outside, the city was already practicing for Friday with early dusk and nervous wind. Inside, the brownstone had survived another invasion. Wolfe's chair hadn't moved an inch, yet 6 lives had shifted around it because he willed. I went to tell Fritz, thinking candlelight makes masks pretty, but it also shows exactly where the wax has dripped. Friday evening came with a raw wind off the river and a newspaper column that called the Candlelit Masquerade the season's most humane spectacle. I read it at breakfast and watched Wolfe's lips curl as if he had tasted lemon. At least they did not call it electric, he said. Saul Panzer walked in before noon with a thin smile and a clipped note. Crowell paid Hella to get the ledger, Saul said, not to scare anyone. He meant to use it to force the relocation clause through the board. When Hella was fired, this morning, Crowell started phoning lawyers. Wolfe nodded. He will phone the wrong ones shortly. Saul left. Fritz announced lunch, and by mid-afternoon, the brownstone was back to its rhythm. Orchids upstairs, Wolfe in his chair, me pretending to type. Around 6, Felicity Harrogate called to say the benefit was underway, the candles behaving, and Julian sober enough to keep his mask straight. She didn't thank Wolfe. She didn't have to. Her voice had the tightness of a woman who'd swallowed pride without water. At 7, Stebbins called. Boss is singing, he said, about the fee charity and the threats. Says he did what Felicity told him. We're charging him with attempted theft and conspiracy, light unless the DA wants a splash. Heller's license is getting yanked. Crowell is under observation. Good, Wolfe said and hung up. We dined on duck with orange sauce that Fritz claimed was not symbolic. Wolfe ate in silence for a while, then said, There is an instructive flavor to this case. Observe how even benevolence can become predatory when it is mixed with vanity. Vanity is cheaper than paraffin, I said. He allowed a grunt that might have been a laugh. You are incorrigible. Later, with coffee, he asked me to bring the real ledger. I did, and he sealed it in its box again, hands careful not to smudge the moral he'd wrung from it. At noon tomorrow, he said, a messenger will return it to Mr. Vale with my invoice. Mrs. Harrogate will pay, because she knows the alternative. What's on the invoice besides your time? Your time, he said. I will add a surcharge for nocturnal excursions. I told him to bill the moon. He ignored me. Outside, the city kept breathing, indifferent to our little victory. By 10, the house was quiet. The orchids were sleeping upstairs. Fritz was polishing copper like a monk, and I was finishing the report. That's when the doorbell rang. I opened to Lila Marsh in a cloak, mask in her hand, cheeks flushed from cold and candlelight. Mrs. Harrogate told me to deliver this, she said, offering an envelope. Inside was a check and a brief note in Felicity's hand. For the shelter. Your fee, with gratitude withheld but implied. Wolfe read it, then passed it to me. You see, Archie, she chooses charity over contrition. That is better than the reverse, though neither is ideal. Lila lingered. She'll keep her word, she said. Perhaps, Wolfe replied. But you should keep yours. Count your candles, lock your doors, and do not let philanthropy excuse cruelty. She nodded once, then left, stepping into the night where 1,000 small flames were flattering 1,000 masks. When I came back in, Wolfe was already in his chair, eyes closed, composing his final thought. Human beings, he said without opening them, are fond of disguises. They call them costumes or policies or good intentions. The disguise is never the problem. The problem is believing it absolves one from the face beneath. I took my coffee to the desk. Then it's a good thing you never wear one. On the contrary, he said, I wear mine openly. It is called appetite. I let that sit in the warm quiet of the brownstone, and for once I didn't have a quip that improved on it. Sunday morning had the brownstone back in its proper mood, honest enough to make yesterday's lies feel antique. Wolfe was upstairs, and I was at my desk sorting notes that no longer had teeth. Fritz moved through the kitchen like a man conducting peace. At noon, the bell rang. Everett Vale came in with Lila Marsh. Everett looked as if he had slept, then worried about it. Lila was brisk but less brittle. I showed them into the office. Wolfe sat in his chair, composed, the ledger box on the table. You will take the ledger, Wolfe said. But first you will understand what happened. You believed Conrad Voss devised the threats. He did not. He carried them. Everett blinked. He met Hella on the terrace. That's not carrying. It is carrying when one is led by a string, Wolfe replied. He opened the box and touched 3 marked pages. These conditions are the motive force. Crowell's money tied to relocating the shelter, the Myers money tied to influence, a promise about Julian's appointment. They are combustible if exposed. The person who knew every line, who feared exposure before the benefit, and who owned the typewriter that produced the threats, is Mrs. Felicity Harrogate. Lila's eyes narrowed. Everett's jaw dropped. Wolfe continued evenly. She suspected Crowell of trying to steal the ledger to coerce your board. She also knew Voss was arranging a private fee through a charity, and Julian's gambling debts made him vulnerable. She chose to manufacture a controlled crisis to draw them into the open before Friday. The clove-scented red candle signaled the terrace meeting. The anonymous letters applied pressure. Sending the ledger here gave her distance from the blast. Everett swallowed. She put us in danger. She did, Wolfe said. She believed her end sanctified her means. That belief is seductive and wrong. I blocked the danger by refusing to send the real ledger to the terrace and by preparing a decoy. The decoy forced Voss to deliver the blackmailer's demand, and it drew Hella, proving Crowell's involvement. The final sheet about Julian's debts, typed on the same machine, left her signature on the scheme. Lila asked, Will she be charged? No, Wolfe said. Not unless she repeats the folly. She has dismissed Hella, voided Voss's fee arrangement, and secured the ledger properly. The shelter received the benefits proceeds. I will not injure that cause to satisfy a taste for retribution. But she knows I can place her confession and her Remington in Sergeant Stebbins' hands. Everett stared at the box. I thought I was bringing it to safe hands. You did, Wolfe said. Safe hands are not always attached to safe consciences. Guard it with 2 keys and 1 safe. If anyone threatens you again, you call me before you improvise. Lila nodded once. Everett rose, taking the box. Thank you, he said quietly. After they left, I poured Wolfe his beer. You let Felicity walk. I let the shelter breathe, he corrected. Justice is a tool. Used clumsily, it harms the innocent. Used precisely, it prevents repeats. Mrs. Harrogate will suffer an irritation worse than arrest. She will remember she was outmaneuvered in my house. Until next time, I said. Perhaps there will be no next time, he replied. Candles flatter faces and lengthen shadows. She preferred the flattering light and forgot what the shadow reveals. That is the lesson. Fritz appeared to announce lunch, the smell of roast chicken arriving ahead of him. Wolfe rose with the dignity of a man whose work is finished and whose appetite is not. The brownstone had its silence back, and I had a report to file that ended with everybody alive. At the table, Wolfe took his first bite and allowed himself a satisfied exhale. There, he said. That is the aftermath. No masks, no candles. Only food and truth, each served hot enough to matter.